Hello, fellow audio nerds. I'm Steph, and this is Major Hi-Fi. The AudioQuest Dragonfly Red is revered in the audiophile community as one of the most portable DAC amps out there. And recently, AudioQuest released their newest in the Dragonfly line, the Dragonfly Cobalt. And these two different priced by about $100. The Cobalt is kind of the step up from the Red. And so my question was, is it worth that upgrade? Is it worth that extra money? Well, let's go back in time. I'll share with you my first impressions, and then I'll meet you right back here for my overall thoughts. Alright, here we go. Oh wait, I can't snap. Hey everybody, welcome to my place. Today I have with me the Dragonfly Red and the Dragonfly Cobalt, and gonna do a comparison review, so let's see what's inside the box with the two of these. Alright, so as you'll see here, pretty similar packages actually. First things first, both come with documentation, both come with little leather carrying case holders, protective holders. Both obviously come with the units themselves. And then the Cobalt actually also comes with the the Dragon Tail, which is basically a USB to USB-C so that you can plug this end into that and then plug it directly into your phone or whatever listening device. So taking a quick look at the design differences between these two, you'll notice that the Cobalt is a little bit smaller than the Red. The Red has more of a kind of rectangular, like old school flash drive kind of look to it. On the other hand, though, the Cobalt's a little bit thinner, a little bit shorter, and a little bit rounder, so it kind of has a little bit more of a modern feel. But both seem to be made of the same materials. They both feel very strong and durable, and both have these little USB covers, which I think is nice and just kind of protects the units. But beyond how they look, there are a few major upgrades that are involved with going from the Red to the Cobalt, and I'm super excited to see how that translates to a difference in sound. But also, it's definitely worth mentioning these upgrades to start to answer the question of whether it's worth upgrading for you. So yeah, let's get into it a little bit. Alright, so the first major upgrade going from the Red to the Cobalt is the DAC chip. Now, to preface all of this, basically DACs use something called a roll-off filter, and it's my understanding that this roll-off filter is used to sort of like kind of roll off some of the quantization noise. So if you have a roll-off filter that has a fast curve to it, what that means is that the slope of that roll-off, like, it happens really quickly, so it's a really steep curve. And as a result, it gets a lot of noise out, but it also can sound a little bit less natural. That's the type of DAC chip that the Red uses. So it has a fast roll-off minimum phase, and it's an ESS, I'm just looking at my notes here, it's the ESS ES9016 chip in this DAC. The Cobalt, on the other hand, has an ESS chip as well, but it has a slow roll-off, so the slope of that roll-off curve happens slower, so it's a more soft kind of roll-off filter, and the result of that, according to AudioQuest, is that it's going to have a more natural sound. Definitely interested to see how that actually translates in sound quality. But the chip that this uses is called the ES9038Q2M, for all the nerds out there. Minimum phase, slow roll-off. So that's one major difference between these two. Next is the power supply filtering. So listening via Bluetooth, over Wi-Fi, through cell signals, this all introduces like a very small amount of noise that, this noise might not even be audible, but what that noise can do to your perception of music is just like change the way you perceive dynamic range, emotional impact, low frequency pitch accuracy, things like that. It just sort of takes away some of the clarity and some of the nuance to the expressiveness of the music, because there's this underlying kind of like noise that interferes with how quiet the song can get, and how the sustains of certain instruments come across to our ears. So with the Cobalt, there's a special um, power supply filtering that helps with this phenomenon and helps clean up the signal and just makes it more clear and expressive. Then the next big difference is this the microcontroller microprocessor, and these two units are different from each other. Actually, the Dragonfly Red has the same microcontroller chip as the Black does, the Dragonfly Black. So the Cobalt has an upgraded one. So what the chip does in the Cobalt is it reduces the current that it draws, and it also increases the processing speed by 33%. What this means, to be honest, I'm a little confused about what this part of it means. If anybody out there is watching this and you know what these kind of how these microprocessors play out in the process of this DAC unit and converting the signal, I'm curious about it, want to learn more. But I know that in terms of in regard to current, in regard to processing speed, the Cobalt has a step up from the Red. And both of these I should mention before moving on to the last upgrade from the Red to the Blue. Both of these are firmware upgradable because of this chip. So it's worth noting, and also to say that, this can grow with you a little bit. And lastly, one big difference between the Red and the Blue that makes the Blue a better value or worth more than the Red is the Dragon Tail. Now, the Dragon Tail here is worth $22. That's what they sell for if you were to buy it separately. And what it is really good at is it kind of helps to reduce jitter and noise from getting into the signal, and it also reduces RF interference. So it's a really great kind of addition to these, because you're going to need something like this anyway. Now, if you have a phone that has a USB-C output, then this is going to be great for you. If not, you'll have to figure something else out. But also now that all the new MacBook Pros have, the USB-C connection there, so this can work for that as well. Now, I'm very excited to give these a listen, because the big question is it worth this upgrade? This is $100 more than the Red, so how does it sound? Alright, so I'm all set up here. I've got a laptop with Spotify on it, and yeah, I'm just going to listen back and forth. And also, one quick thing, I'm listening with my Focal Listen Pro headphones, because I know them really well, and also I should mention that the amount of power, the output voltage of the Red and the Blue are the same. So if you found that you could not get quite enough power with the Red, you're not going to get more power with the Cobalt. So I would definitely recommend, if you have a headphone that's a little bit power hungry, going with a different DAC, DAC amp altogether. But for these headphones, they're pretty sensitive, and they don't require much power. So let's see. Alright, already I'm noticing a pretty big difference between the Red and the Cobalt. So I was just listening to the song Normal by Conor Oberst and the Mystic Valley Band, and the kick drum in the song sounded much tighter and just more precise in general with the Cobalt. I heard more separation between the kick and the bass guitar. The bass seemed to have more extension to it, or just more spaciousness around it in general. So I'm already noticing that the low end just feels more precise, more tight. They both kind of have that feeling of punchiness with the kick, but it just feels less spacious with the Red. Anyway, yeah. Wow, another really big difference in the mid-range. So I was just listening to the song Shout Mountain Music by Old Crow Medicine Show, and With the Dragonfly Red, the fiddles, the vocals, the hand claps all kind of felt closer in space. Like they had more, kind of more high mid energy or something. And with the Cobalt, they sat a little bit further back in space, but had really just a much more like greater feeling of separation and dynamic energy, expressiveness, because they're all kind of like moving a lot, and with the banjo too, and they're all kind of moving, and I could really hear the separation between all of that, the instruments, and it's a pretty thick arrangement in that song. So yeah, definitely getting something really special out of the Cobalt that I just was not getting with the Red. Yeah, and I am having a really similar kind of feeling in the high frequencies as with the mids. So basically, the finger snaps, the kind of the lower treble of the voice, the throat of the voice, the cymbals. Those all kind of sounded louder in the mix with the Red, like they were sort of pushed forward a bit. And with the Cobalt, they sit a little bit further back. Not like they're in the background or anything, but just they feel a little bit more natural in terms of like how those frequencies sit. But that said, I felt more extension with in the highs with the Cobalt, and I also noticed just more expressiveness when like the cymbals would flare, or kind of when there's I'm sorry, I don't think I mentioned I was listening to the song Fever by Ray Charles featuring Natalie Cole, and like when the cymbals flare, it just feels more like expressive with the Cobalt, and also just more like more extended and natural sounding, for lack of better words. And I'll also mention too that to me it felt just more aesthetically pleasing. Like the way the vocals sounded with the Dragonfly Red just felt like it had this like really good level of detail, but was just less smooth sounding. And there was more of like a warmth and a smoothness and like a naturalness to the sound of the vocals, the timbre of the vocal, and how those frequencies kind of sit. So, kind of interesting. Wow, and I noticed the difference in soundstage like immediately to plugging in the Cobalt over the Red. So I was listening to the song 1919 by Terry Lynn Carrington, and yeah, so the sense of height with the cymbals just felt more extended with the Cobalt, as did the lows of the upright bass. And the thing that was actually most interesting to me about this difference in soundstage was, so the piano was, you could tell, recorded in stereo, because across the kind of keyboard of the keys, you can feel like it moving from left to right when like the lower notes hit, it's in the left. When the higher notes hit, it's more toward the right. And the separation between notes in the stereo field felt much more precise and had a lot more separation and just spaciousness around the notes with the Cobalt than with the Red. With the Red, it just felt more condensed, like it was more compressed together and stuff like that. So a pretty big difference in that regard. And then lastly, as for the feeling of depth, so in this song, it's three instruments: piano, upright bass, and drums. And to my ears, it's like the piano is most up front, and then the bass and the drums are sitting back a little bit further. And with the Red, the upright bass and the drums kind of feel like they're in the same place, like they're kind of sitting like just behind the piano like this. But with the Cobalt, I heard a lot more specificity to their placement, and maybe it's because I could hear more of the room or something. I'm not exactly sure why, but just it came across that way. But so with the Cobalt, I felt more like, okay, piano closest to me, then the bass, then the drums a little bit further back, and there's just more nuance there in that sense of depth. But anyway, I'm very excited to keep listening because I think the Cobalt is really, I'm very intrigued by it right now. So I'll keep listening throughout the week, and then I will meet you back at the Major Hi-Fi office with my overall thoughts. All right, here we go. Overall, the low frequencies of the Dragonfly Red and the Dragonfly Cobalt have a similar feeling of punchiness to them, but they differ in how tight and spacious they feel. The Cobalt takes low frequency instruments, and because it has a cleaner noise floor, there's just more space around those instruments, and as a result you can hear more of the overtones, and they just sound more realistic in general. And while the Red certainly has a nice feeling of punch to it, it just doesn't have the same kind of three-dimensionality that the Cobalt has. Now, you remember how I talked a little bit about the role of the roll-off filters in the DACs, and how the Red and the Cobalt have different kind of roll-off filters. To me, those filters played the biggest role in terms of like how the mid-range came across audibly. So the way it came across was that the Red seemed to have more of a high-mid presence to it. Instruments with high-mid information seemed to sit a little bit closer in the mix. They felt more present. But with the Cobalt, it felt like that part of the mid-range just felt a little bit more spacious, and it also seemed a little bit tamer, a little bit more natural sounding, less of like in your face and more just kind of natural and realistic and warm, yet still maintain all of the detail in that area. Overall, the high frequencies of the Dragonfly Red and the Dragonfly Cobalt had detail and harmonic complexity, but with the Cobalt, there just seemed to be more spaciousness around those high frequencies, and as a result, they felt more expressive when cymbals would splash, and I heard a little bit more of a sense of like overtone and harmonic complexity to strings, hand percussion, that kind of stuff. And it just, because like with the Red, it seemed like those high frequencies were sort of condensed into a smaller space, and as a result of that, they kind of seemed to sound a little bit louder in the mix. It's like more information and less space made it feel like it was a little bit louder, and as a result, it just wasn't as natural or smooth sounding as the Cobalt. So to my ears, this came across in like the Cobalt having just a more aesthetically pleasing high-end response in general. And as for the sound stage, the thing that really differentiates the Red from the Cobalt is the noise floor, and then how the frequency response feels weighted, because you know how I said that the Red feels like there's more high-mid kind of presence? Well, with the Cobalt, there just seemed to be more nuance in general, more three-dimensionality, and more expansion in all three dimensions, really. And because so much was just, with the Red, felt a little bit more condensed, because of that, instruments with high-mid information just felt closer in space. It felt more intimate, more close, but sort of lacked the quite the nuance that the Cobalt had in regard to the sense of depth. And same thing in the width. The Red definitely kind of gives you an image of the mix, but with the Cobalt, it takes it to the next level, because you can really just hear more space between each note, and thus it feels more particularly placed in space. Overall, both the AudioQuest Dragonfly Red and Cobalt are super portable DACs, and they will enhance the sound off of your phone or your listening device. That said, though, the Cobalt is definitely a step up from the Red. All of the upgrades just really made the sound quality go to the next level, and so if you are in the market for a DAC that is this portable and you want something that's going to sound the best for you, the Cobalt is definitely going to give that to you over the Red, and is worth the $100 upgrade. Thank you so much for watching. For another perspective on the Dragonfly Cobalt, you can check out the link down below to my colleague's review of the same DAC, and also I'll leave a link there to my long-form written comparison review of these two DACs. But anyway, thank you so much. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and for more videos like this, be sure to subscribe. Alright everybody, I will see you next time. Bye!